The next podcast is about target audience, which forms part of LO2. Your target audience in this case is the person or the group of people that the final product will be aimed towards. It's important that you understand them before you can plan something for them. It's really important because if you were going to plan a product for a boy solely, it might be very different from what you plan for a girl, or something for a child rather than something for an adult. Those things are very, very different. You might have heard of the term segments of the market, particularly if you study business studies, and that's basically what we're talking about. According to the specification, the segments or the categories are as follows: gender, age, ethnicity, location, income and accessibility. Those 6 are the only ones that this qualification asks for. There are more categories that a target audience could fall into. Again, if you study business, you're probably going to know of other ones, but these are the only ones that are concerned with in R081. Our first major category is gender. So gender's male or female. It's important to think that certain products can appeal to both genders, whereas others might be more specific to one. For example, a perfume is for a female, an aftershave is for a male. There are key questions to ask. So is this a product for men? Is it a product for women? What colours are for each gender? Now there's very stereotypical ideas there. Pink for a girl, blue for a boy. If you were aiming towards both genders, it's unlikely, for example, that you create a website that was pinks and purples and stereotypical girl colours. You might pick something more neutral. However, it is also really important to think, are you actually being sexist about it? Are you making a presumption? A product can be targeted at both genders equally. There is such a thing. However, you also have products that are mostly for men or mostly for women. It's not meaning that the other gender will not have anything to do with that product. You might have to think which gender is the most likely to buy that. The next one is age. So it could be very, very specific. It could be a range, such as 11 to 16 or OAPs or toddlers. However, something can again fall into more than one age range. One of the examples I often give is if you were a country, for example, Turkey, you might have a target audience of certain segments. So you might have 18 to 30s, OAPs, 40s to 50-year-olds, families. You have to appeal in your marketing to more than one group, age-wise. So like I said, questions here are, is it only for one age range? What will appeal to that age range? So for example, if you were looking at teenagers or people in their early 20s, you might use a celebrity from something like Towie or Made in Chelsea or Geordie Shore, whereas that's not something that will be appropriate for an old age pensioner. They would want something completely different. And that might also affect your language choices. You might use more slang for younger audiences or more formal, more complex language for older audiences. You've also got to think about, are all adults the same? Adults is a very broad term. What a 20-year-old wants is probably very, very different to what somebody who's 90 wants. And is there a way to produce something which encompasses everyone? So what happens when your product is for a wide range of ages? You've got to be very careful not to turn a certain age group off by your choices. Your next target audience category is ethnicity. It's about your background ancestry. It's also about your religion or your culture. So you have to ask who might access or use this product. Can we target a particular ethnic group? It's always important to think, what you're saying or writing potentially racially offensive? Is it appropriate to, if you are planning, for example, an animation, have names that are of different ethnic origins, or people or characters that have a different culture, say a religion, making that potentially slightly obvious, or different coloured skin for your characters to encompass everybody. Same with if you were thinking of advertising in certain areas, for example, foods, there might be certain areas where you don't advertise certain foods because of religious beliefs. You've got to make sure that you ask this really important question. What can we do to make sure we don't offend any particular group? If your choices are offensive, you are going to lose customers, and your client isn't going to want that. Your income of your target audience is really important. So how much money somebody has from their wages, which they may be able to spend on things. You've got to think about, does your target audience have a high income? Does your target audience have a low income? Here it's important because the products that you choose have to be appropriate. If you're targeting families, sort of middle class families or working class families, having your main character in your TV advert driving an Aston Martin is probably not the best bet. But same as if your product is a really high-end product, you need to think about how you're reflecting that for your target audience. What impact does someone's income have on their ability to buy things? It has a big impact. Low-income families are looking for bargains. Higher income families are looking for exclusivity. And it's all about planning to make sure that you know your average target audience's income to make sure they're willing to invest in your product. Location is the next category. It's about where somebody lives or spends most of their time. So for example, that might be because of work. I'm thinking particularly about, say, London. A lot of people who work in London commute from outside of the capital. So you've got to ask, do people from towns want different things to people who live in cities or in the countryside? Chances are that they do. You've got to think about what access to facilities people have. So it could be to do with broadband speeds. So if your target audience is in the countryside, in places with poor access to an internet connection, and you're creating a website, you might want to think about keeping the media to a low level so that it doesn't have to load. Is there a difference between the north of the country and the south of the country? Is there a difference between cultures in different locations? Certain areas of the northeast, for example, have a high population of people from other countries. Same with other parts of the UK. London has a larger demographic. So you've got to think about that in your product. So do you have to alter your product to meet the needs of that region or that area? The answer is possibly yes. And you've got to think about that. So would there be a tweak or a change just to make something a little bit more suitable for that location? Accessibility is one that can be quite difficult. It's a category about making sure that everything is available to as many people as possible. And this refers to people's potential disabilities. So you've got to think about what kind of disabilities people might have. Is that a learning need or a physical need? And how would these disabilities affect their ability to access the product? So if you were designing a website, you might consider having a text-to-speech option embedded in there. Or if you're doing an animation, you might consider having some sort of subtitles to go along with the words that are being said, just so that if somebody can't read very well, can't hear very well, they've got something to read. So what kind of things do you do to support your target audience? Some things, it's hard to make them accessible. Other things, it is much easier, and you've got to think about whether or not you can do something. The key points is that while the target audience might be defined in one way, these are not the only people who buy your product. So you might have a stereotypical girls aged between 16 and 20. It's not saying that anybody who's 15 or 21 won't buy it, or even a boy won't buy it. It's just those are the people who are your main target audience. And like it says there are exceptions to this at all times. So this exam paper is just one example of a question to do with target audience. It's from the June 2015 paper. And it says the income of the target audience of the supermarket advertising campaign needs to be considered during pre-production. It says explain one way that the income of the target audience will affect the content of the advert. So if you're switching over to the mark scheme here, you get 2 marks, so a point with an explanation. So for example, the products on sale, 1 mark, will be those that the target audience can afford, 1 mark. Or putting it in a context, a low-income audience will only buy lower priced products. So basically you're saying that the products that are on sale reflect what the target audience can afford. And moving over to the mark scheme, it shows that this question was poorly answered with generic unrelated answers. It's talking about here how the candidates, so the people completing it, miss the relevance that the target audience must be able to afford what's there. The marks were lost due to poor exam technique, and because a lot of candidates started to talk about how Three Oaks wouldn't have the money to make the advert. Three Oaks aren't the target audience, they are the client. Going back to the question paper, the next question was the target audience can be categorised by income. Identify 2 other ways that the supermarket's target audience can be categorised, and then give an example. So part of the importance of this question is that it says 2 other ways. So it means income is out of one of your 6 choices. You've got to pick from one of the other 5. It means pick a category: age, accessibility, ethnicity. They're all important. And they're suitable categories. And then you've got to use an example. So looking at the mark scheme, you can see here that you've got age will get you 1 mark, and then a wide range of ages will need a wide range of products. So that's explaining it. Or in this case, you could also give 30 to 40 years, which is an example of an age range. Gender, same. The sale will appeal to both genders, so products need to appeal to all genders, or male and female as the example. Location, and then interests or lifestyle is being included as an option. Okay. Looking at the examiner's report, the question had a mixture of responses. Candidates failed to gain full marks by not identifying a category. And it does say here in the additional guidance, if the category is wrong, then don't mark the example. So if you don't get the right answer here for category, if you write the correct answer, for example there, the examiner can't go on to look at it. So they'll look at category. Is that right? Yes. Okay, go on to look at the example. If it's category, is that right? No. They can't then look at the example. The example, though, might help explain the category. And your marks, as it says there, the second mark in each response must relate to the category. So if you've talked about age here and then said male and female, you can't have the example answer because male and female isn't an example of age. There was repeated answers, so it may have been that the category was identified as 30 to 40-year-olds, and then the second example was second category, was OAPs. It's just the same answer, okay? And again, you do have to avoid including income in there. You wouldn't get a mark for income because it's in the question.